Hi, Mark. You're on mute,
Good
RP.
evening. Are we ready? Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Baltimore City Public Schools presentation for the fiscal year 23 budget priorities. Um, I am joined by my esteemed colleague, Mr. Courtney Desabe, who will introduce himself shortly. But before we do so, let me finish introducing myself. My name is Mark Laveau. I am the Family and Community Engagement Specialist out of the Office of Communications, Engagement, and Enrollment. And I am the district lead on the budget engagement process. Today, as I shared, we will be going through with you some paces to share some information and to get feedback from you on the district priorities for fiscal year 23. I would now like to introduce Mr. Courtney Desaby.
Thank you, Mark. My name is Courtney Desabe. I'm the Special Assistant to the Chief Financial Officer. And as Mark shared, we're going to run through today a conversation on the budget priorities for fiscal year 23. We're going to talk a little bit about the process, how it works, what we're doing differently, and go through some of the priorities that are up for feedback today as well.
During today's session, we would ask that if you have questions or comments, you can post your questions and comments in the chat. Um, Most of the questions we can answer, or we may need to consult or get this response from other staff members. So we will try to answer the ones that we can, right? But when you do share a question or comment in the chat, please be sure to add your names to the question so we can get back to you in a timely fashion. We would like to publish these responses in our Q&A or our question and answer at the end of this process. But we won't publish your personal information. Okay? Um, Today's agenda, we want to share with you how the school budget is funded, how schools fund their budgets, also how it aligns with the priorities for this upcoming school year. We want to share with you the reconnect, restore, and reimagine, which we call the R3, coming out of our strategy for re-engagement, right? And the fiscal year 23 priorities, we will share that with you. We will get you to give us some feedback on that through an activity we have planned for you all. We also will be sharing a link to the survey to get your input and feedback, and also get an opportunity to hear your voice. So with that, I would turn it over to Courtney Decibel.
All right, thank you, Mark. So the first thing we're going to look at tonight is just a brief overview of the budget development process. So there are 10 main stages to the process, and what it starts with is the priority discussions, and that's some of what we're doing right now. This takes place in two different forms. So there's school level priority discussions, where schools engage their community members to get an understanding of what's important to them. As you can see, this is at the very front end of the budget process. So it starts in November, December with the schools, and we're doing it now for central office and the district. And this is, this part of the process is really the ideas and the thinking before you get to the dollars. Part of the history of this too is that historically we used to engage folks for feedback on the budget in March and April, when the board is voting on the budget. And of course, at that point in time, it's very difficult to make any major changes or incorporate new items into the budget, which is why we're doing it at this point in the year. So even though we don't have, the budget allocations out yet, schools don't know exactly, what their dollars are, we do want folks to start thinking about what's important to them in their communities. And we're doing the same thing here in central office by getting your feedback on the priorities that we're discussing. Enrollment projections is the next part of the process. So this is basically taking the enrollment from last year, September 30th, and projecting what we think the enrollment is going to look like for the upcoming school year. We have the school performance plans, which are schools' methods of setting up a plan for how they're going to approach learning in the upcoming school year. These are aligned with objectives and based on data from previous years, and they're individual based on the school's needs and goals. We have the school community budget forums. This is the second of 3 opportunities for engagement with your school leaders and school communities. This is after the school leaders have received their allocations and they're reaching out to the community members to say, now that we know how much money we're getting, please come tell us what's important to you and how we need to work it through our budget. The next phase is the budget collaboratives. These are all-encompassing meetings where all school leaders come in. They get supported by folks across central office. From human capital to finance to Title I to special ed, teaching and learning, scheduling, et cetera. So they sit at a table with folks from all these different areas and work through the actual building of their budgets by incorporating the things that they received as feedback from the community as well. 6, we have the community budget review. So this is the third opportunity for engagement. This is after, school leaders have built the budgets, they go back to the community members and say, well, here's the final version of what was submitted. There are cases where the budget that they come in with is not the final budget for one reason or another, whether it's compliance issues or changes in allocation or there are new ways in which they can move their resources around. The budget may change. So they go back, in full transparency to explain this is what the final budget looked like. The next phase is the budget approval. So this, goes through the various offices. Everyone, takes a look at the parts that are pertinent to their sections. The folks in Office of Human Capital look at staffing and staffing recommendations. The folks in special ed look at the special ed recommendations and guidelines and what was put into the budget. Same for Title I, same for the other aspects. So everyone reviews the sections, making sure that there's compliance with COMAR regulations and budget guidance. Next is the budget vote. So that again is another public interaction. The board receives the budget and a few weeks later we have a vote. We have an opportunity between the initial budget presentation and the final vote for additional community feedback on the budget. Then we get into the nuts and bolts, so the actual staffing. Once the budget has been passed, through the months of summer, we go through the process of staffing up the budget and schools based on what's allocated in the budget. And then the end of the process is the fall enrollment adjustments, where we make adjustments to the actual school budgets based on the enrollment on September 30th. So what's different this year? I mentioned that we updated the timing a few years ago in terms of how we address these priorities, that we have this conversation earlier in the year than we normally would. This year, we're adjusting that approach even further. Historically, we've had conversations on priorities, and those priorities have sort of sat, independently. We've spoken about priorities based on what we're presenting at that point in time for that fiscal year or the upcoming fiscal year. And then we've had conversations on priorities based on the blueprint or conversations on priorities based on, different elements. So this year, we really wanted to streamline the process and make sure these things were all sort of synced up, that we're having one unified conversation. So instead of the list of like 20 to 30 priorities that, we presented in previous years, this year is a much more concise list. And the items in the list are very specifically in alignment with what you've already seen or been discussing with regards to R3 and the district's overall blueprint. So it's making sure that we're having a very cohesive and coherent conversation on funding, that we're not, sticking a bunch of different things in front of you that seem sort of disjointed or separate, and making sure that, the conversations we're having are all related and that you're seeing some of the same goals and priorities from the district, set forward for your feedback and for consideration. So gone are some of the things that were, more relevant, like, if we were spending money on copying or whatever other individual priorities, offices may have. We've taken some of those things out that really aren't on the same scale and scope as some of the items that we do have on the list, which are a lot broader. The other thing that you're going to see is that the priorities now are a lot more school focused and school facing, because that is the goal with R3 and with the blueprint as well. So it is about how we're allocating resources in central office to really support and bolster schools. So back to R3, as I said, the priorities this year are really tied very strongly and stem from R3. And you guys have heard a lot about it over the last few months, so we're not going to, belabor it a bit, but there were preconditions in place for R3, the sort of environment that we exist in with COVID-19 and, the virtual environment created, a need for certain things that we've seen needed to be addressed going forward. And that's what R3 has sought to do. And the trickle down effect of that is that making sure that as we go through the process of addressing those preconditions, we're incorporating student voice, community engagement, equity, and professional learning. So that led to the 5 key strategies for R3, which are wellness, school, culture, and climate, expanded enrichment, academic opportunities, personalized learning, acceleration, and reimagined time for students. And again, following the, the diagram that we had before, these things all being tied together, the 6 priorities that we're going to discuss come very, very directly from those key strategies and are things that you've seen discussed in the previous R3 presentations. So the 6 priorities, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about them in the next few slides, are tutoring, extended learning, arts and enrichment, sports, mental health supports, and school culture and climate. The first one, tutoring. So key driver of our personalized learning strategy is high quality, high dosage, evidence-based tutoring, which is designed to help targeted groups of students overcome academic challenges and allow them to access their academic potential and promote student success. These programs focus on foundational skills in literacy and math and support students with accelerated learning and credit recovery. Programs will be offered during the school day as well as in extended learning opportunities. Continued investment in this area will ensure City Schools is able to increase in tutoring programs across the district, allowing programs to serve more students in need of support. Extended learning. Through the extended learning priority, City Schools will invest in meaningful ways for students and teachers to experience more flexibility and variation around their instructional time. This will be reflected in reimagined daily schedules that support more time for small group learning, interventions, and tutoring. To achieve this over the next 3 years, we will invest in more paraprofessionals to support this approach. We will also invest in extended learning periods at the beginning and end of the day to support specific students with unfinished learning. Arts and enrichment. In alignment with the Fine Arts Strategic Plan, City Schools seeks to ensure that all schools are staffed with qualified arts teachers and offer additional opportunities for students to access music, visual arts, theater, and dance across our traditional schools. Sports. City Schools seeks to increase student access at every school to a variety of athletic opportunities through clinics, clubs, and intramurals, in addition to the current interscholastic offerings. City Schools will also provide support for all schools to expand informal athletic programs for students by establishing community-based partnerships and providing stipends for staff who have interest in leading activities with their students. And the last 2, mental health supports. Attention to the mental health and wellness of students and families is paramount. Efforts in this area continue to ensure capacity to support our expanded school behavioral health programs across schools. ESBH clinicians, who are licensed professional counselors and social workers, provide individual and group sessions to students based on student need. In addition, efforts to expand social worker services, increase awareness of mental health support, counseling and advisory, as well as supports for home visits and wellness checks. School culture and climate. Emphasizing culture and climate means that schools have the time and space to create intentional activities that enhance the day-to-day environment of the schools, especially around relationship building and customer service. And this one in particular can take a number of different forms. All right, so I'm gonna ask Mark to come back. We have a little activity that we're gonna do where we're going to start looking at some of these priorities. So, the priorities, the 6 priority areas that we just read through and gave some descriptions on, we're going to do a live survey for the folks who are participating. This isn't, the official district survey, which you're going to have the link for on this presentation on the district website where you can participate as well. But we will incorporate the feedback that you give us here. And it's going to be the same format as the survey, where we're going to ask you to rank, from these 6 priority areas, the ones that you feel are most pertinent for you and your school community.
Okay, thank you, Courtney. So while we are preparing to get into this activity, I just want to jump to one question that we had in the chat. Courtney, I'm going to read the question for you. I think it's a question that we can answer, right, at this point. The question is dollar allocation based solely on enrollment, or are the needs of the school population and school community considered in allocation too?
That is a very good question. So enrollment is not the only factor. It is the biggest factor, but not the only factor. In fact, we updated the Fair Student Funding Model a couple years ago in fiscal year 19 to incorporate poverty, gifted and talented, and other elements into the weighted funding model for how we allocate resources to schools. So that is something unique about how City Schools does funding at the school level. We use what's called a weighted funding model. And we're one of, a number of districts in the country, but one of very few in Maryland who actually use that model, where it's not just a staffing allocation of, here's the number of teachers you need. We provide dollars based on the specific demographic needs of the students and that individual school community. And then on top of that, the school leader, with input from their community members, can determine how they allocate those dollars precisely. So is our school community one that needs additional support or counseling because of something that's taken place or whatever, that current issue may be? If so, then, can we support by doing X, Y, and Z? So we actually have, the flexibility to allocate resources based on the needs that the community and school leaders identify, not just based on the enrollment. You can have 2 schools with the exact same enrollment number of kids enrolled, but have very different budgets because the makeup of those kids, can be significantly different.
Okay, so I hope that was able to get to the answer for this particular question. I wanted to ask if you all are seeing my screen currently.
We are.
Okay, so great. So what we would like you to do now, this is where you get a chance to give some input and feedback. This is where we get you to participate directly in this discussion. So we want to know what you think about those priorities that you just heard about, those 6 priority areas that Courtney Desbe just shared with you, and he went through all of those priorities. So we would like you to get your cell phones out, and for those of you with smartphones, we would like you to scan this QR code, right? And it will take you directly to this app that you can then respond to the questions in the app, right? If also you can go to this website, www.menti.com, and then when you get there, you enter this code, 11666868. I'll repeat that code, 11666868. So once you get in there, you will then let us know how you would like to rank those 6 priorities in order of importance to you. So I've seen some folks that are in there already, ranking so far. You're going to, again, rank the 6 priorities in order of importance to you and your school community or your community in general.
For folks who are still getting in, I just want to point out the link at the top of the screen. So you can see where it says www.menti.com and use the code 11666868 to get in. So anyone who hasn't gotten in yet or didn't get a chance to scan the QR code on the previous screen, you can still enter that code to get in and enter.
We have 4 people in so far, but I know we have a lot more people on here. This is the time to share your voice, give your input, let us know what you think. I'm going to go back to the screen with the QR code so folks can continue to scan the QR code to get into the app. And I would be remiss if I don't share, I can take an opportunity to share. We do have a Spanish interpreter for this session. However, we will be having a session tomorrow for our multilingual families, and I'll share more information about that a little later. We'll give you just a few more minutes to respond. There we go. The numbers are going up. We have about 15 people giving their voice and sharing their input on the priorities. Ooh, we just bumped up to 19 people. Come on, keep them coming. Keep that your voice. Let's hear what is important to you. You're ranking the priorities in order of importance to you and your community. We're now up to 21. We'll give this maybe about 2 more minutes to see where we land and to see what number we land on. But this again is not your last opportunity to provide, to give your input and feedback, right? We do have a survey link that we will be sharing with you at the end of this session, and we will also be posting that on our website and social media pages for you to be able to go on and share your input and feedback on these district priorities. We have 25 people sharing so far. Thank you all so far for participating. In the meantime, we will take a few more questions. Courtney, does the same algorithm apply for schools that have higher numbers of students with IEPs?
Yeah, that is a very good question. So piggybacking on what we were discussing earlier with the dollar allocation not being tied only to enrollment, but on the intricacies of the individual students, there's a formula as well for how we allocate special education resources for schools. So it does take into account the number of hours required for students for their IEPs and for the specific supports that are needed. So it's addressed in multiple ways. For in circumstances when some of the requirements are very specific, we allocate based on positions. So there may be locked positions or resources, even contractual resources that are provided to the school in support of that student. There are instances where, you know, the student's needs, if they cannot be met within that specific environment, we have schools who are dedicated towards specific students' needs as well to provide support. And then we do have discretionary funding that individual schools receive and principals receive, again, that are based on the calculation of hours of support provided to students. So we have a number of different ways in which we do take into account IEPs and the severity of IEPs and the supports that are required to ensure that we're providing adequate resources for students regardless of the circumstances that they're in.
Okay, this was actually like a 3-part question, and I think you may have responded. The other part of the question is the dollar allocation based solely on enrollment, or are the needs of the school population and school community considered in allocation as well?
Yeah, I think that was addressed in the previous question. I think this was just a follow-up to that question, so they included the original. But we did, as I said, yeah, we do take into account the individual needs of the school population and the community.
Okay, thank you. All right, drum roll, please. We are coming down to the wire. We have 40 people who gave voice to their order of importance when they ranked these priorities, right? I will leave this open still, but in the meantime, we can take a look at the results from our 42 participants now providing input, where they rank the priorities in order of importance to you or your school community. And in first place, we have school culture and climate is ranking first in the order of importance to our participants thus far. In second place, we have mental health supports. Third, arts and enrichment. Fourth, extended learning. Fifth, tutoring. And sixth, sports, right? So what I would also like for folks to do in the chat, you can give a brief statement as to, you know, why did you rank your top three? What was your top three, and why did you rank those as your top three choices? I know that will take a bit of a minute or two to think about that, but tell us why you ranked the priorities in the order in which you did. In the meantime, we will respond to two other questions. The first question is there a place to view the exact formula breakdown of the weighted school funding and how that's allocated for transparency's sake?
Yeah, so we share every year with the schools and school leaders, and we do put it up on the district website what the allocations are on a school by school basis. And actually, over the next year, we're going to be engaging. Part of our, well, let me back up. Part of our commitment is that we're going to review and revise the funding formula that we use at least once every 4 years. So our last update on the funding formula, as I mentioned, was in fiscal year 19. So we're going to be over the next year in engaging community members and reviewing the current funding formula to determine whether or not we're going to make any updates to that formula. As I mentioned, one of the major updates from the last change in the formula in fiscal year 19 was incorporating weights for poverty and concentrations of poverty. The other thing that has changed since then is that we have the new Kirwan funding, Kirwan Commission funding, which begins this year. So that's going to change how resources are allocated to schools, but also how schools are reporting out on the use of those resources. So over the next year, we're going to go through the process of updating our funding model to be more in alignment with the new Kirwan model, but also to get, you know, updated feedback from the community based on, you know, what folks think should be a part of the funding model, you know, moving forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for responding. Thank you for your questions. I'm taking one of the comments in the chat on the question I asked earlier on around the priorities. We now have 45 respondents to the ranking question. And this comment is, I completed the survey, but I strongly feel that they are all first priorities and students in every school should have access to all these priorities. I couldn't agree more with that comment. The next comment is some of these categories are interrelated. For example, participation in arts programs can have positive effects on mental health and school culture and climate. How can you accurately rank these categories when there is so much overlap? That's a great observation right there. And in one of our earlier sessions, we did a session for the youth. We did a session for the community partners. Both sessions were done last week. And some of these same responses came up around these priorities. Yes, there is overlap. Yes, they are interrelated, because if a school is doing something around arts and enrichment, definitely it will impact the climate. It will also impact academic achievement, mental health, etc., etc. So that comment is right on point. There was one other comment that I would like to share that says, these kids need an outlet along with getting the assistance they need to Amkemsire them under what they are doing. Please forgive me for messing that word up. Not just passing them and neglecting the fact that they matter. That's how I ranked my top 3. Thank you for that sharing. And I'm sorry for stumbling over that word that you shared in your sharing.
Yeah, I think that was a typo. I think they were trying to say that they need to understand what they're doing. To an earlier comment as well, I did want to stress, and I think the folks who shared that, the kids need all of these, they're absolutely correct. And we are going to be participating or leveraging these as much as possible during the fiscal year 23 budget. What we're asking for feedback on really is an understanding from the community as to where they feel the greatest areas of focus should be. But it is our goal as much as possible to try and provide as much of these and as much of all of these as we can in the upcoming fiscal year.
Okay, we will take one more comment and then we would move on to the next slide. So it's still holding. There are no changes in the order. I think extended learning just overtook arts and enrichment. That's the change so far with 46 respondents. So this comment is, I feel in order to move the dial, academic supports are very important. Tutoring and extended learning should be tied to their individual learning plans. Attention to mental wellness will normalize seeking help and paying attention to their state of mind. So thank you all for those great comments and that great insight into as to why you ranked these priorities in the order in which you did. Thank you very much for your input. Again, this is just an activity during this format or forum, but you do have an opportunity to provide your input and feedback via the survey link that we will share later on in this presentation. So thank you all for participating in our interactive activity. Courtney?
Thank you. Let's see. Let me bring our slide back up. All right. So thank you everyone for participating in the activity and also for the comments and questions. We have, as Mark mentioned, we had last week a youth-focused engagement and community partners-focused engagement. This is an engagement for our general public, and tomorrow we have our multilingual families. What we have here, and as Mark mentioned, we'll have on the district website, is the link to the survey. So it's going to be an activity just like what you participated in. We're going to ask you to rank, the 6 priority areas. But, of course, giving you some more time to kind of read through the descriptions of the priority areas. We're also going to ask that, if you have any areas that you do want more information on or you need to dig in on further, that you can send us those questions. You can send it to us via our social media platforms. And we can also share the presentation on the district website. I think someone was asking that as well. We can make that available so folks can access it there. But we just want to make sure that your questions are being answered, that we're providing as much information as possible, and that we can provide, if there are things that we can't get to right away, we can do an FAQ to sort of do some more research and get back to you on as well, so that you can provide feedback. So the dates for our engagements, like I said, we have one more after today, which is our multilingual family engagement tomorrow, January 27th. So we're hoping to hear from you. We want to keep the survey open for another week or two, hoping that we can get some more feedback from folks on the priorities, and that we have some information that we can share with the board on what folks feel is important, and that cabinet can take into consideration as they build the budget for FY23.
And please note that this session is being recorded and will be posted to our website and social media for your perusal at your leisure, right? So we will be posting this presentation on the district website, so you can always go back and listen to the recording and get the information that way. Additionally, you would see that last bullet about the community engagement dates for your schools. Each school will be required to engage their school community, as Courtney shared earlier, in the budget engagement process. We are currently in the phase where schools are getting feedback and input from their school community around school level priorities, which may even match these priorities that we have for district priorities. But we have a link that takes you to the dates and times of those school level meetings. So if you visit our district website, you will be able to access those dates and times and the link to the virtual meetings on that spreadsheet information, right? So again, you have this opportunity to provide around the district priorities, and you also have the opportunity to participate and let your voices be heard on the school level priorities at your respective schools. So we are still inviting questions and comments. So feel free to place your questions and or comments in the chat around any information that was shared with you here today. And remember, you can use the QR code that is on the screen and get a jump start on the survey to give your input and feedback via the survey for district priorities. And I see folks are still responding to the Menti question about ranking priorities. We have 50 respondents, and the order is almost the same. I think, there is a slight change. So we still have in first place school culture and climate. Second is the mental health supports. Third
I'm not too sure, but I think Mr. Laveau may have been disconnected. Um, so as Mark mentioned, we'll share the link and the presentation after the meeting. We'll make sure it's on the district website so folks have access to it as well. And we'll make sure that any questions that you guys get to us that we weren't able to address right now, that we can try to get back to you on the future. There was one question, can you clarify what extended learning is? Yeah, I can very quickly go back to the slide that details extended learning and what's involved in there. So extended learning is investing in ways for students and teachers to engage outside of regular instruction time. So we're looking at flexibility around when instruction is taking place, meaning, after, before regular school hours or extended day, sort of opportunities for learning. Next question, will prioritizing sports or art include providing more funding for supplies? Absolutely. So the focus on the priority areas or on investing in these priority areas is making sure that we're providing enough resources for these things to be done meaningfully. So focusing on arts does mean additional staff for arts, but also supplies related to arts and arts programming. Same for sports. Investment in sports means, programs, but also the items that are required to support the programs as well. And we have another question. So are all schools required to get school family input on school level budget priorities? Yes, all schools are required to have community meetings and to get inputs on their budgets. We have a link in the presentation, and I believe there's access to it on the district website, that will show you when every school is having their community engagement meetings. So it'll show you the dates and times for all of those meetings. So if you didn't get that information directly from the school, which you probably should have, you can access it via our website as well, so you know when your particular school or schools are having those engagements. I think those are all the questions that we have for now. So I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to attend with us and participate. The 50 or so folks who participated in the live survey, and every one of you, I hope, is going to participate in the survey on the website as well. Again, make sure you take this opportunity and all the other opportunities we provide to give your input and make sure your voice is heard, not just at the district level, but with your school as well. Look up the dates for your school meetings if you don't know, so you can know when those are taking place. And please take the chances that are provided for you to make your voice heard and provide feedback on the fiscal year 23 budget and the budget priorities. Thank you, everyone.